All right, Justin. So here we are again, man. It's our Justin and Justin podcast.
Love it.
We last spoke in February when the world was a different place,
Very different.
and winter had not yet come. And man, just to catch up, and you and I were chatting a little bit before hitting record. But what has this looked like for the Funraise team over the last 6-7 months? And as a leader, and you know a driving force for Funraise for a business, how have you dealt with this crisis?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's funny. At least in the early days of the pandemic, it felt like the playbook was changing almost daily. And so I think that the first thing that our executive team really just agreed upon is we're just going to be as agile as possible. And we're not going to try to forecast or predict what's going to happen the rest of the year. So we going into 2020 though, we had large growth plans. We had hired a team. We had doubled our sales team, ramped up marketing. We had put a lot of investment in growth. And as soon as the pandemic hit, we weren't certain how that would impact growth that we had mapped out, but we knew it would have some impact. So our goal immediately switched from high growth, hyper growth to how do we survive this year without having to, let go of anyone. We want to keep the sales team. We want to keep our marketing. Like, how do we just navigate these uncertain times? So we really made that decision together, and the company came together shoulder to shoulder. And although it's been hard to see, we've been separated since March. We've been working remote since March, and we've traditionally have been a very low in-office sort of culture.
Right.
But it's been amazing to see the productivity increase. People not commuting, people spending more time with their families. People seem generally happier, even though we're living in a stressful time.
Yeah.
So much so it's actually causing us to think, are we ever going to go back? Like, people love this remote life. So that's kind of a high level. But it's been interesting, and what has made up for like the growth goals shrinking a bit. We're still growing, and we're still onboarding a ton of new clients, so it's exciting. We've seen that sort of get made up by just the transition our customers have had to go from more traditional fundraising to digital. And so it's been a different growth challenge. It's been a different growth opportunity. One that I believe is not conditional to the times we're in, but is actually going to be a part of the DNA of so many nonprofits, moving past the pandemic.
Yeah, it's you use the word agile, and I think that agility is something that everyone has had to tap into with this current time. And I think about there was in the last month or so an article put out by McKinsey, the renowned consulting group, that commented that in 10 weeks we advanced digital adoption by 5 years.
Yep.
Right? So in 10 weeks you move forward 5 years, and that has an impact. So in the spirit of agility, and being agile as an executive team, how has that impacted your product roadmap? How has that impacted the way that you either develop new features or roll out new features, and then explain that out to your customer base?
Yeah. So I would say one of the interesting things that had happened, so like going into the year, so Funraise has always been sold to enterprises for the most part. Like, that's our, we're focused on organizations that are just more stable and are, have more sophisticated fundraising and marketing initiatives and programs. Going into the year, before we knew COVID would hit, we realized that there's huge amount of opportunity at the SMB level, and these are organizations that obviously they don't have a ton of startup capital or capital to invest in really great technology. So what COVID did for us is it forced us to shift some priorities in terms of roadmap product to accelerate something that we're going to be actually launching here in a couple of months, which we call Funraise Free. It's going to be for nonprofit organizations under $1 million in revenue who need great software to adapt to the times that we're in and be able to grow, with the product. So if they hit the 2, 3, 4 million, they'll have more product that they can add to their tool belt as they grow. So it's forced us to think about, how do we help nonprofits during this time who don't have a lot of extra capital? How do we grow with them? And at the same time, how do we continue to build out the enterprise products that we know will help our customer base, but more now with a focus on less traditional, CRM product and more digital fundraising tools that help organizations take a more omni-channel approach.
Yeah, and that's one of the major emerging trends coming out of it, right? That
Yep.
And there are these pre-coronavirus trends that have been massively accelerated, both at the strategic level, like the need for better retention. Like
Yep.
that's a strategic trend that has been massively accelerated. But then there's also, some more tactical trends that have emerged. And I think that, even when you talk about Funraise Free, or the free version of the product that's to come, giving the smaller nonprofits the option of replacing PayPal as a donation form.
Yep.
Right. Giving, let's get you onto something that's a little more mature, something that you can grow with, that sort of thing. You think through that, you look at the shift to virtual from an event space, from a gala, space. You look at the massive explosion in streaming as a
Yep.
fundraising tool. There have been some really incredible developments and transformations that have happened since March. What are you seeing, or what do you believe are the most exciting transformations that are happening right now that will continue to blow up through the remainder of 2020?
I mean, you really nailed it with the research that McKinsey put out. It's essentially, I think it's less about a specific product adoption, and it's more that nonprofits have been forced to adopt digital fundraising strategies. And that was something you typically see 10-20% of an organization's revenue come in from online channels. It's completely flipped now. And so I think that's been one of the most fascinating things to actually see. And organizations have done this incredibly well. They've made this pivot in almost a seamless manner where it's uninterrupted so many nonprofits, overall revenue goals for the year. A lot of our customers, I mean, you of course have organizations that are struggling and haven't been able to navigate the situation. And, there's all sorts of, variables for that. There are a lot of organizations, and I think it's the organizations that basically say, we're going to still fundraise through this. We're not going to stop fundraising. We're not going to stop what we're doing, and we're just going to keep going. These organizations are doing incredibly well today. We were fortunate right before the pandemic, we actually released some new product that was around streaming, that was around, online, being able to host those streams and to have donation overlays on streams. So we had done that ahead of the pandemic just because we saw that trend was something that was happening anyways. And so we were very fortunate to have that ahead of COVID. So that is something that we gave to our customers to for their events and so forth. And then the last thing I think is it's really important, and something that we're advising our customers is as we go into Q4, which is obviously gala season, end of year giving, and so we're going to see this huge uprise in virtual galas. It's not just to try to take the event that you were going to do in that ballroom and do it online. You have a massive opportunity. I mean, so many nonprofits pour so much energy and time into the content that's created at these events, and only 200 people see it. Today, it's unlimited, right? This thing's going to be on the internet. It's accessible to anyone and everyone. And so I think the opportunity to get the word out, to raise more funds, to use this content, not just in one night setting, but week after week after week. I think there's just so much opportunity that nonprofits would have potentially been afraid to try to do if the pandemic wasn't here. So I'm excited to see how these virtual galas work out and what nonprofits do.
We can no longer kind of rest on, well, this is how we've always done it, right? Like that's gone. That ship has sailed, And to your point, when you talk about events and they're no longer being geographic boundaries,
Yep.
but not just that, the opportunity that we have right now to enter into a new space. I mean, we get to be trailblazers, right? And I wouldn't have said that or thought that with the same spirit a year ago,
Yeah.
right? Because yes, we were evolving as a space, but we're actually setting the course for the next normal of what fundraising looks like. And I think that that's super exciting for us, even in the midst of what is still a pandemic,
Yep.
globally, from a health standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, and still trying to figure out what that looks like from an economic standpoint.
Totally.
Uh,
I just to comment on that real quick. I think I think a lot about that, and I call it like the blockbuster moment. Like nonprofits, they have to make the decision: do we want to be Blockbuster or do we want to be Netflix? And that question was here well ahead of COVID, but it's forced nonprofits to look at that question much more seriously and with a lot more immediacy, because their survival is on the line as a result.
and nothing can make you maybe more agile than having something like that nip at your heels, right?
Exactly.
Gets a little
Exactly.
adrenaline going, and you start to push through. So here we are in early September having this chat, catching up, and whenever we look ahead to the fourth quarter, as you mentioned, it's exciting because of the opportunities that we have in virtual, and it's also exciting because it's traditionally a very important season for giving, and a season where many nonprofits tend to make their year, right? It can be a difference maker, but we still are in this spirit of uncertainty, and we were chatting about that briefly. The uncertainty with just the virus itself, the uncertainty around the heat and impact of an election. There are so many uncertain forces, and so I'm curious what you feel like Q4 is going to look like from a giving standpoint, um, and what impact this uncertainty could have on year-end donations compared to years past.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And if there's one thing 2020 has taught me, it's to stop trying to predict the future. But I'll do it anyways, just because it'll at least be fun to look back on at the end of the year and see how close we were.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold you to either side, right? I'm not
No,
going
yeah,
to.
totally. So there's a couple like metrics that are interesting to me to look at in Q4. One, I think, is inevitable is the margins nonprofits will see for every dollar invested in fundraising is going to be much higher. You're not going to spend $100,000 on a gala this year. You could spend 30 or 40 and raise much more money than you would at an event. So I think the ROI on fundraising dollars is going to be much more significant in Q4 than in most quarters, perhaps. And in terms of just the velocity of giving for Q4, I'm very optimistic that it could potentially be one of our best quarters in a long time, one of the best Q4s in a long time. And the reason for that is there's a few reasons. One, I think if we look at disasters that have happened, ahead of Q4 giving, you generally and you see outpouring of dollars raised during these world disasters. Q4 giving is usually unharmed by that, right? So looking at COVID, this is a global disaster. We saw a huge influx of giving. I think that's just the generosity of individuals who want to come together. They want to do something. I think humans are inclined to be generous. And so it was just a human response to kind of come to the aid of your favorite charities during these hard times. And I don't think that's going to be like, oh, I've already done my part, I'm not going to give anymore. So I think that there's still plenty of opportunity, but organizations, I think the biggest obstacle organizations have to overcome is, hey, we did that big COVID campaign in the summer. Can we really do it? Can we really do another big campaign in Q4? And the answer is yes, you have to. You have to run your Q4 fundraising like any other Q4. And you have to put yourself out there and you have to set your goals and you have to go for it. I think this is what will be the difference between organizations who do well and those who don't. That's what we saw in the summer. So I'm optimistic. I think that it could be a record breaking Q4. as long as organizations put the same energy and effort they would have in previous years.
Completely agree. I was having a conversation with a colleague today who is also very bullish on Q4. And so you have to, we have to teeter exactly as you just said, man. If you look back to 2017 with the hurricanes, and you had 3 hurricanes hit back to back to back over the course of a number of weeks. And yes, there's a tremendous amount of disaster response. But at the end of the day, if you express your need in the right way in December, people are gonna respond to that.
Yeah.
And actually, the better that you steward that relationship from between disaster giving to whenever that need comes up again, the better chance that you have, obviously, from retaining and gathering second gifts. And so I agree. I think that it's an opportunity for nonprofits to invest in Q4 like they haven't in the past, because you can do it in smart ways.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that you have to sink everything into one channel. Obviously, if we've learned anything about the need to be agile, it's also the need to be agile together and collaborate together. An example that I'll share that I saw an organization that we work with do is that early in April, they noticed that they were having some challenges with caging, because they cage internally. So they get their direct mail receipts coming back in. They're processing that stuff internally, and because of their location, it became difficult for them to receive things. And because they couldn't have staff go to their offices, they couldn't actually process it at the same speed. Well, that's a major issue, because then the dollars don't get into the bank.
Yep.
Right. And not only that, but then your acknowledgments, your dependencies on communicating back to that donor are all dependent on you having someone in-house open that envelope, look at, process, enter data, etc. So they actually communicated out through mobile and through direct mail that, hey, you're going to be getting stuff from us in the mail. The best way for you to help us right now is to go online.
Huh, interesting.
The best thing for you to do is to go to this URL. You can safely, securely,
Yeah.
And so, I don't know that they realized that they were blazing a different trail, but it is.
Yeah.
Because it's forcing that collaboration. And, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for nonprofits to do that right now as they plan for Q4.
Totally.
In and out of their gala.
Yep.
In and out of, the fall acquisition that they're going to be doing, in and out of the way that they're going to be using social and display, et cetera, to tighten up that collaboration, and express the need and say thank you, 70 times over.
Yep.
To deepen their relationship. So really interesting.
And on that too, like if you think about it, like just how the world has changed is help consumer behavior adapt to this sort of thing, right? So if you normally run direct mail in Q4, you can still do that, but put a QR code on your direct mail piece, because we're all used to scanning QR codes going to restaurants now.
Right.
And whether you're 25 or 60, like everyone has to do it. And so I think that like consumerism has adjusted, and no longer do we have to really educate a population of our donors, because if they're living in society, they've been forced to also change sort of the way they interact and touch things. And so I think that, it's such a great point where you can use the same channel, but provide maybe a different outlet. And that it's going to be interesting to see how strong direct mail campaigns, how they perform this at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the QR thing, because had someone like you or I made that recommendation, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe even up to 10 years ago, it would have bombed in terms of showing an ROI, right?
Yeah.
Never would have happened. And so to your earlier point, Justin, like remove the idea that what we previously tried or the way that we've always done is the way that we should do it, and look at things from a fresh perspective. And I think that that's going to help those who enter into the market with fervor in the months ahead. Man, it's a great chat, and I'm excited to see what's coming from Funraise in the coming months. Just as we wrap, you've already talked about the event thing, so you can't talk about the event side of the product. You talked about the free version of the product, so you can't talk about that. So I'm asking you to go a little bit deep, and I'm just curious, like this is a time for transformation, and so I believe that from everything that I see, read, and watch from you and the team that you guys act on inspiration at a very high level. And so I'm curious, what else is in the works, or what project is it that you're working on right now that's really driving some inspiration for you and the Funraise team?
Yeah, I would say another component, another thing that we've been really excited about. We've been working on all year, and is also close to releasing. Is basically an online university for fundraisers, and we've brought some of just the brightest minds of created content, video lessons, and we're giving it away for free. There's not going to be any cost to that either. And so it's really tied into who we are as a company. Is we want to provide resources to the nonprofit community. We want to increase generosity. And so I think this next phase of sort of our content that we release and that we're giving out to the nonprofit community, which is going to be catered, towards a new sort of a reality of how your organization must be thinking about fundraising in 2021 and beyond. I'm excited to get that out there, because I think there's lots of good stuff that, whether you're at $1 million nonprofit or $100 million nonprofit, can be really valuable. So that's been a fun project to work on, because it's as you mentioned, it's how do we iterate on things that have worked well in the past, but because of the condition may not work as well now? What element of it still works, and what needs to change? And it's been fun having those conversations, and hopefully it's helpful for the community at large.
Man, that's great, Justin. I love hearing that, and knowing that you and the team just continue to give back and to sow into the space, and to see the ride. So as people hear this and want to connect with you, or to find out more about Funraise, where should they go? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Wheeler. You can check out our website. It's funraise.org. No D, just funraise. Or you could shoot me an email. It's justin@funraise.org, or a text 562-242-8160.
All the options, man.
All of them.
Justin, it's great catching up to you, man. I can't wait to see these elements of the product come to life and get out on the market, and we'll have to catch up again and look back on our predictions and see how we fared.
Let's do it. Love to.
All right. Thanks, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.